So in this video, I actually want to talk about whether you can be an astronaut or a Fortune 500 CEO for your career. I know some of you are thinking of going into different careers at this moment. You're probably watching this. Maybe you're in high school. Maybe you are a college student at this moment and you're thinking about different careers that you should pursue. I'm going to encourage you to actually pursue those ones that are really crazy, because I think that you will thank me in a few years for doing that. So if you don't know me, I'm Professor Dave Maslak. I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There are so many people that helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor for to help you out. So is being an astronaut or is being a Fortune 500 CEO, is that actually a reasonable career? Is that a reasonable dream for you to actually have? And I'm going to tell you this right now. It is absolutely reasonable for you to choose those particular careers. Now, I'm going to tell you this, that it is very unlikely that you are actually going to get to one of those careers. The chances of you actually becoming an astronaut or a Fortune 500 CEO or becoming a professional athlete, it is astronomically pathetic in terms of actually getting into any of those careers. That it just does not work that way. You will be one of 1 million, one of 10 million people that are actually thinking the exact same thing. However, what I want you to think about is not the odds of getting into those careers, because all of those careers is terrible in terms of the chances of getting in and doing something that's successful in those particular careers. But what I want you to think about instead is where you will be if you position yourself in that particular industry or in that particular domain, right? We have to stop thinking about snapshots in life. We have to think about the fact that life is this long-term goal or this long-term videotape, essentially, where you're looking at where you can go. And what you do is you set your career aspirations extremely high, because what you end up doing is you work your way into a domain that is something that you really truly want to do. I've seen this play out many times in my life with friends and family that have done this. And I've also seen it play out the opposite, where friends and family have chosen not to do something because they thought it was too hard or too difficult, and they were just like, meh, I'm just not going to do it. But what you do, so imagine this, you imagine yourself to be an astronaut. I don't care if you're from India, I don't care if you are from Argentina, I don't care where you're from, if you're from the South Pole at this moment, and I don't care if you're male or female or whatever you look like at this moment, the chances of you becoming an astronaut is very small, but you should be striving to get there if you really want to do this. Because what you're going to do is you're going to work in a domain. So what you're going to do is you're going to start your career and you're going to say, I want to be an astronaut. So you might go into aerospace engineering to get the degree that is going to be closest to becoming an astronaut. So you get into aerospace engineering, you get trained in aerospace engineering, and after 4 or 5 years you get out and you realize, you know what, I really like this career, there's great things that I'm working in, I'm working with people that are airplane mechanics and doing all these crazy things, I'm going to go back to school. So you go back to school to become an astronaut, and you get your doctorate, you get your PhD, you get whatever you need to do, you can become an MD, where it might be useful in space, where you're doing space experiments and things like that in terms of what you're thinking about. And you're like, wow, this is really cool. I got myself a little closer. And so all of a sudden, once you've done those different steps, the pool of people that are actually qualified to get in and to be comparable with you actually shrinks dramatically. But not only that, so the labor pool gets really tiny at that moment that have all of your assets and skills to get into that. Now, I'm not doubting any of those things. They're really hard to do any of those particular things. But if you keep your goals set high and you keep moving towards that, the labor pool shrinks in terms of who is available and who's similar to you. But the other thing is that all of a sudden you've positioned yourself such that if you choose not to become an astronaut, you can do all sorts of wonderful things at that moment that are very similar to becoming an astronaut, whether it is working at some sort of aerospace firm that you are doing something that's incredible, or working in a scientific lab, whatever it is, and it's doing things that are fun and interesting that really relate to what you are actually interested in. And so you have to stop doubting the fact that you can't possibly be an astronaut or a Fortune 500 CEO. Another example is the Fortune 500 CEO. So what is that? That's the top 500 firms that are in the world at this moment that are being that are based on size, right? That's like Walmart and Target and companies like that we all know about. Now you want to become a CEO in that particular space. Well, you know what? You probably have to get a finance degree or something like that, or maybe go to a business school or get an engineering degree or whatever. You go and get that degree. All of a sudden your labor pool, it's a little smaller, but it's not that much smaller compared to what it was before. But then you start thinking, you know what? How do I actually get there? So you start working on projects. Maybe you go into management consulting, or you start working on projects that actually start getting you closer and closer to becoming CEO. And then you realize, you know what? I need to get an MBA. So you go get an MBA. And preferably you get it from some top school where the market is all of a sudden, the labor pool is smaller. So you've done that. The labor pool is small. And guess what? Now what you can do is go into all sorts of different positions such that it's going to be very similar to that. So you say, I want to be a Fortune 500 CEO. I'm not going to quite get there, but I can be the CEO of a 25-person company easily at this moment. So you go and do that. And then you go and after you've been the CEO of a 25-person company, you're like, you know what? I could leverage it and go to a 300-person company. And then pretty soon, you know what? You might not be at a Fortune 500 company, but you're being a CEO of a fairly large company at that moment that everybody and their dog would admire and think is very cool. So I just don't want you to limit yourself in terms of where you're thinking, where you're going to. And if anybody is going to discourage you and say that is a pie in the sky idea, they don't know anything, because you have so much potential if you start thinking in terms of these long-term goals in what you're doing. Even if you're 50 years old, you still have 30 years left of your life to do something that is incredible, or not, and even 40 years or 50 years left to do something incredible. So stop limiting yourself and saying, I can't do those things because it's outside my reach, and actually start pursuing them. I think you can do it.